shifting alliances and impact on global geopolitics, and of course, how can we use the changing dynamics to mitigate the adverse effect on the society. We are in a world where we see shifting corporations. We are in a world where we see new alliances born, and of course, the solidification or solidifying of already existing alliances as the global world continue to evolve. You know, as the new world order is emerging still, a new axis of world powers are also emerging, bringing us to looking at how these changes in the global world can affect, of course, global geopolitics, global peace, and stability, you know, as the world is no longer constrained by traditional partnerships. Nations are re-evaluating their affiliations based on shifting economic interest, security concerns, and even ideological affinities, among other aspects, once dominated by Western power. With the quest for the new world order, the definitions of influence and partnership are expanding as we witness the rising influence of nations such as China, India, and the Russian Federation, the formation of new coalitions, particularly the BRICS expansion as BRICS embraces new members. And of course, we also note the growing ties between Iran, Russia, and China, North Korea, among others. And of course, all of these challenges the established Euro-Atlantic paradigm and reveals trends of collaboration among countries that were once deemed rivals. It should be noted that, of course, this realignment of power not only creates fertile ground for opportunity, but also introduces potential for conflict as countries navigate through the complexities of diplomacy, trade, and security. Also, the role of international organizations is increasingly scrutinized as nations look beyond traditional frameworks to adapt to the rapidly changing environment. How, therefore, those change in relationships, ideologies between countries affect global geopolitical setting and its implications on global peace and stability, since the global transformation is unavoidable and we are in the middle of the battle for the future. The core question or the problematic is the agenda that is suggested for the future and the value set that underlies that agenda. This and more we're going to discuss on this edition of Global Insight. Stay tuned. Thank you once more. If you are just tuning in, you're welcome to the Discursive TV program on your Pan-African television for you, Media Africa. Today we are looking at shifting alliances in a multipolar world and looking at the effect of this or impact on global geopolitics. How can this affect global peace and stability? And what is shifting alliances and what are the indicators of the shifting alliances in contemporary society? Time for us to uncover the panel, taking you straight away to the United States of America, precisely to Washington, D.C. Let's welcome Achille, Ekeu, banker and international financial expert. Hello to you, sir. Thanks for joining us on today's edition of the program.
Good morning, Clarice. Thank you for the invitation. Good morning, all televiewers around the world of the program. Thank you for the invitation. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Looking forward to having a fruitful discussion now with you, Mr. Ekeu. As always, to Germany, let's acknowledge the presence of HARLEY SHLANGER, who is, of course, the international spokesperson for the Schiller Institute. Hello to you, HARLEY, and thanks for joining us again today. HARLEY SHLANGER.
Yes. Hello. Thank you very much for the invitation. This is an absolutely timely topic given events in the world what's happening in the United States, what's happening in Europe, and especially what's happening in Africa. So I look forward to an excellent discussion today.
Indeed, it is an interconnected world where we see new alliances born. But then how can we actually explore the scope of these alliances to mitigate the negative effects on society? And to Russia, let's welcome Alexander CHOPOV, who is a political scientist. Hello to you, sir, and thanks for joining us this day.
Yes, hello, everybody. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for having me. As the previous speakers mentioned, this is a topic that is important right now, and that hopefully this discussion will help shed some lights on.
Absolutely, the topic is timely given the changes happening in the global world. Let me start off with you, Alexander. Today we're talking about shifting alliances, but I want us to define the term for proper comprehension by our viewers out there. In your perspective and in relation to international cooperation, what can we define or what can we connote as shifting alliances?
Well, I mean, we are at a very interesting time in human history, let's say. Because the previous world order has, the post-Cold War world is no longer viable, right? Where you have one single hegemon that just puts its feet on the planet. But the new world order has not been built yet. And we are at the point where I'm sure the other speakers and many of your viewers have heard of this, through CDC's trap. It's a term from the Peloponnesian wars between Sparta and Athens, all the way back thousands of years ago. And the idea is when you have a stable power, the main power, right, which at the time was Sparta, and you have a rising power, Athens, wars are mostly inevitable. And there are charts that you can Google and look up of similar situations over hundreds, thousands of years, where you have the hegemon and a rising power, and in most situations, unfortunately, that led to war. You have all the way from the 7-Year War, the Napoleonic Wars, the World Wars, and we are somewhere close to that point, unfortunately, right now. We're pre-gaming World War III again, unfortunately, and hopefully we can avoid that. And obviously, the hegemon, the declining hegemon, the United States, and the rising power, China, are going to be looking for allies across the world for that upcoming conflict, hopefully a Cold War, or maybe even they can get along. But this is the time when both the rising power and the hegemon are looking for allies across the world.
Indeed, of course, very brilliant, like you highly underlined, Alexander. It is, of course, a new world order where we are moving from just the one country dominated. Some pundits still writing on this very topic highlighted that we are in a world of shifting alliances where the West seems to be lagging behind. And of course, we have gone past the Cold War era, and it is imperative to redefine a new stage for more international cooperation. Coming to you, HARLEY, with this definition of the term shifting alliances outlined by Alexander, I will appreciate if you elaborate on the indicators of shifting alliances in today's world and what clearly defines the changing paradigm in contemporary society.
Well, let me start by going back to a little bit of a personal involvement in this, because I've been involved with the attempt to build a new world economic order since the early 1970s, working with Lyndon LaRouche and the Schiller Institute. And what we proposed at that time, by 1975, it was clear that the Bretton Woods system had been trashed by Nixon, that we were in an era of floating exchange rates, which gave power to the hegemonic banking institutions out of London and Wall Street, and that they were the ones who defined themselves as a unipolar order after the fall of the Soviet Union. Now, what's interesting is that this move toward new alliances actually started as a result of the looting of Russia after the collapse of the Soviet Union by the attempts of Western banks to take the country apart, steal the raw materials, and impose on Russia an austerity program that led to a demographic collapse. And out of this, a Russian patriot, Yevgeny Primakov, who was a foreign minister, then later the prime minister, and was connected to the Academy of Sciences, had a series of discussions in the late 1990s about what to do about it. And he proposed at that time what he called the strategic triangle of Russia, India, and China working together as a counter to the collapsing International Monetary Fund Western system. Now, a few years later, in 2009, at the Rhodes Forum, which was sponsored by the Russian oligarch Yakunin, Lyndon LaRouche gave a talk where he said, look, for this to work, you need India, Russia, China, but you also need the United States. Let's see if we can figure out how to get the United States away from being the sole superpower to be a collaborator. And so since that time, we've been working to try and make that change. Now, of course, that's not easy in the United States because you have a military-industrial complex, you have a financial complex that thinks it's destined to rule the world. And in fact, outgoing President Joe Biden in a speech last week said, I'm running the world. That's the delusion that many in the West have. But while they've been living with that delusion and attacking the potential adversaries, Russia, threatening China, and so on, and Iran, what we're seeing now is the emergence of the BRICS that has an expanding grouping. It's connected also with the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, a Eurasian perspective that has the power to stand up to the declining dollar order. The question is, as you know, as you've posed it, is will this be a peaceful change, or as Alexander said, the Thucydides trap, will this lead to war? And that's the issue that we have to take up. Is there a way that we can convince the Western powers that it's in their interests to work with Russia, China, and India, and the global South, as opposed to trying to maintain their position as the global hegemon?
Thank you so much, of course, and that is why it is imperative, Harley, that we analyze the nitty-gritty of some of these changes to ensure how the world can survive in a more connected society. Of course, we come to you, Achille Ekeu. When we're looking at the shifting alliances, the African continent cannot be left behind because of what we see today. Africa being actually seducing more and more international states, and we see some sort of a mad rush, or 21st century mad rush for the African continent, countries carving their new spheres of influence and also seeing more alliances being created. So with all of these changes occurring, what is the African perspective, and of course, how can African states position in this new world order to also, benefit from the many opportunities that present themselves?
Well, thank you for the question, Clarice. As global alliances shift, I think Africa stands at a pivotal crossroads. From a Pan-Africanist perspective, these changes offer a unique chance to advance unity, self-determination, and sustainability development. The expansion of BRICS to include Egypt and in Ethiopia is a significant step towards economic integration and collective bargaining power for African nations. This alignment offers unprecedented opportunities to diversify economic partnerships and reduce dependency on Western powers or Western markets. therefore aligning with the aspirations of Agenda 2063 for prosperous and integrated Africa. So the formation of the Alliance of Sahel States by Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger marks a significant shift towards self-determination. So by developing their own investment bank and cutting exports to former colonial powers, these countries are asserting control over their economic destinies. Strategic partnerships with Russia and China further support this move, providing debt relief and essential supplies. So the decline of Western influence, particularly French in Africa, is accompanied by the rise of new partnerships with Russia and China. You see, these alliances offer alternatives to traditional Western dominance and align with the Pan-Africanist goal of reclaiming agency and fostering a more equitable global order. The resurgence of Pan-Africanism continues to influence African politics and governance. Despite challenges, there is a push for democratic governance and human rights across the continent. Institutions like the African Union play a crucial role in promoting these values, reflecting the enduring influence of Pan-African ideals. So, as Africa navigates shifting alliances, it must remain steadfast in pursuing Pan-African unity and self-determination. Leveraging new partnerships can advance the continent's development agenda and achieve the vision of Agenda 2063. By embracing Pan-African principles, African nations can create a prosperous, peaceful, and influential continent in the 21st century. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me stay with you from what you have said holistically, Achille. I can identify that you pointed out on economic integration, sustainable development, self-determination, and even new alliances, Western influence, among other aspects. So with the New World Order that has already emerged and is ongoing, we want to look at the aspect of integration, or Africa navigating this scope positively to its own advantage. Let's look at the aspect of economic integration. How do you envision, especially the expansion of BRICS to include African nations influencing the economic landscape of the continent in the next decades or the coming years?
Well, that's an excellent question, because if we talk about development, we have to talk about economics and how does Africa interact in the global world in terms of economics, and how it could be done sustainably with partners that allow Africa to be able to chart its own course, and benefit effectively from those relationships, instead of those thwarted relationships that or rigged relationship that we've had with the West for hundreds of years. And so this is the most important aspect of the alliances, the shifting alliances that we see in the world today. African countries joining BRICS, like we have Ethiopia and Egypt, and more to come. And I heard Cameroon is applying to be part of BRICS at the next meeting, the next summit. And I'm hearing other countries in Africa applying to be part of BRICS, Algeria and others. This is an opportunity for Africa to kind of, remove itself from that locked partnership that has been detrimental to its own people for centuries. So it's an opportunity to look towards other areas of the world and see, hey, how did those countries that develop? You look at China. China was a country that no one saw coming. It's like we went to bed, we woke up in the morning, and then here is China, the industrial complex of the world, the manufacturing complex of the world, the most developed country. The GDP is growing at crazy numbers. We've got development all over the place. We look at infrastructure building in China. You can't even dream. I mean, America, we love America. I'm an American era stuff. But when you go to China, you see what they've done over there. It's like years ahead of America right now. So it's so much development that happened, and we still don't understand. No one can, at this point, no one can fathom what happened, for China to be so powerful. That's because they turned inward. They worked inward. They focused on, putting the groundwork, doing the hard work of putting everything that's needed to rise, to soar as a superpower. And they did that quietly for years, and no one saw it coming. And today, this is what Africa needs to look at and say, hey, how can I look at these people, look at the China's model, and see what I can take from that? How can we unify? How can we work inward, try to unify, try to create groups or alliances like the Saharan alliances that we just mentioned earlier? How can we, make sure that we can work together first before inviting outsiders to come in and help us? Because there's so much work to do from the inside. We can't just sit there and just call people to come and help us. There's so much work we can do on our own. We haven't done that legwork yet. That legwork has to be done, and we haven't done that. So when people come in, they just see, a disaster, and everybody's like, oh, this is a mess, and everybody just picks up whatever he can and leaves. But there is a responsibility that we all have as African to work, within our own means, we have to put the legwork, to do the legwork, so that when it's time for us to rise, then when we rise, people will be coming and looking at us and say, wow, what did you do? How did this happen? And people will be stunned. At that point, you have a leverage on those foreign countries that are coming to help you. You have a leverage, you tell them, listen, I choose my partners, this is what I want to do, this is who I want to work with, and this is how I want to work with that person. If you don't like it, please leave. That's fine. And this is what we're already starting to see with the Saharan countries. They're choosing their partners. They are stating to everybody that we have the right to choose who we're going to work with. So don't think it's the old relationship where you were dictating the terms.
Absolutely.
No, today we are the one dictating the terms, who to work with. If we don't want to work within our terms, then we have opportunity. We have other people who are willing to work. We have China, we have Russia, we have Turkey, we have Iran, we have many other countries, we have Brazil. All the global south is willing to work together now. And in a partnership that is a win-win for all of us. So the old alliance it has to disappear, and they have to they are the one to start to adapt to the new existence, the new world order today that's being built, and Africa has a word to say in that new world order. So definitely, Africa's path to growth, to development, has to be done internally first before involving external partners.
Absolutely, Achille. It is very imperative because with the new changes occurring, it is imperative that the African agenda is clear to be able, of course, to capitalize on the advantages of new alliances coming forth in the new world order. Coming back to you, Alex, when we were talking in the preamble, we highlighted the fact that the setting that came after the Cold War, of course, to bring about a structured world order, to see how countries involved can, come out from some of these devastating consequences of the Cold War. But then now we are in the 21st century with a lot that has happened, and it is affecting the balance of power. So I would appreciate if you elaborate on how shifting alliances affect the balance of power in contemporary geopolitical landscape, and what the implications this actually have on global stability. If you can, take the case study of, some of the geopolitical rivalries that we have, especially in Europe.
Well, I mean, obviously, shifting alliances and around Africa. Africa is the jewel of the world, with all the human resources, all the natural resources that it has, that were for centuries absolutely exploited by the Europeans. And I would argue that one of the reasons for the Russophobia in Western Europe is because it was Russia, it was the Soviet Union that helped decolonize Africa, that supported African decolonization processes. And you have Joseph Borrell, right, one of the heads of the EU, saying that Europe is this wonderful garden, right, well, and the rest of the world is a wild jungle. He was born in 1947. There were human zoos with African children in Brussels in the 50s. And it was the Soviet people who helped decolonize Africa. And that is one of the reasons the West still hates us for that. And the shifting alliances, these countries were, even though they were on paper decolonized, but let's say, the French Africa, I only learned this recently because, I look at the map and these are supposedly free countries, right, independent countries. And then I learned that their central banks have to keep their money in Paris, and that Paris controls their interest rates and things like that. And this whole process of decolonization is not over yet. And finally, it's coming into its own with African countries actually choosing their allies, right? They're throwing off the yoke of not only colonialism, but neocolonialism, and are coming into their own, and with the resources that they have, with the human potential that they have, again, and with hopefully Russia, China, the BRICS countries, the global south, coming together on terms where it's not domination, it's mutual respect, it's actually allies and not vassals, that, as the previous speaker was saying, Africa can start growing and experiencing that, and using that incredible potential that it has, realizing that incredible potential that it has.
Okay, thank you. And of course, in the same light with you, HARLEY, during the times of the Cold War, we were looking at ideological battle, but today we are talking of more geopolitical, contestation around, areas of interest by the world's superpowers. And of course, this is affecting international cooperation and even globalization. So with all of this, I want us to understand, maybe give a clearer understanding on the same area of the balance of power that will help, especially the West to understand the shifts in the narratives that can, help them to inculcate the changing dynamics, to be able to redefine a new world order that brings in every opinion and for the betterment of mankind, here talking about global peace and stability.
Well, let me start by saying that the West is in denial. The Western nations believe that they have a right to plunder Africa, to plunder Asia, to plunder South America. And underneath this, it's a form of racism. There's no way to get around it. Alexander mentioned Borrell's comments. This is typical in Europe also. The idea that you have these backward nations, and this is the legacy of imperialism. And the imperial order goes back 5 centuries. But it's over now. I think we're seeing an end to that, and we're seeing the West reacting foolishly, trying to hold on to it. And I would argue, and maybe we can take this up later, that the war in Ukraine is an attempt to stop Russia. The talk of global NATO is an attempt to stop China, because they're fearful, the Western nations, that they're going to lose their cheap raw materials and cheap labor. Mm-hmm. Now, I want to take up this question that was brought up earlier about what China did. China did something that virtually any country can do. It's not just turning inward, although it does require that. It's having a credit policy which goes into developing the resources of that country. And these resources include the human resources. This is why Africa is so rich. It's got a young population that's hopeful of a better future. And that's where investment needs to go. Now, you're not going to get investment from the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, from Chase Manhattan Bank, from Deutsche Bank. They have a one-way flow of resources. They hook you into a debt trap and then exploit you and keep you under control with conditionalities and so on. And that's why there's been so little development in the period after World War II. And that's changing now, because what China has introduced with the Belt and Road Initiative is the idea of credit for internal development and giving countries in Africa access to some of the technologies. Mm-hmm. And that's what's new. And I can tell you that the Western bankers want to stop that, because they look at what just happened, for example, with Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso. Poor countries, but why are they poor? They have resources.
Absolutely, yeah.
They're poor because of French colonialism. And they're throwing that off. They're getting out of the control of the Western banks. And it may mean a period of difficulty initially, but you pull up your bootstraps, you go to work, you generate internal credit, you don't depend on Western banks because they come with a hook. The hook is you get in debt and then we can grab your resources and your cheap labor. So these new alliances, the BRICS, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the African Union, what we're seeing is countries coming together, figuring out how to pool resources and technology. And most importantly, creating credit that can go into the physical economic development so that the resources can be used by the country they're in for development. And this is the change. And let me just make one other point here.
Yeah.
The original idea of geopolitics was a British imperial conception of divide and conquer, in particular to prevent an alliance of European countries with Eurasia. That's being destroyed right now with what Putin and Xi Jinping are doing, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization bringing in India, Pakistan, Indonesia, Malaysia. We talk about African countries coming into the BRICS. It's Algeria and Nigeria and Cameroons have all applied.
Yeah.
And they'll all be in the BRICS sooner or later, which means they'll have access to a different credit policy than the International Monetary Fund. And that's the potential for nations to develop their own economies using national currencies. Maybe at some point there'll be a BRICS currency or something of that sort, but that's not, you don't have to rush to that. The main thing is the investment in the physical economy so that productivity goes up based on improvements in education and skill levels.
Yeah.
And that's why the future is bright, but that's why the Western bankers and the military complex and intelligence community is looking for wars to stop it. And this is what we have to fight in the United States, this network which is willing to destroy every last person in Ukraine for the sake of weakening Russia.
And of course, that is where the problematic lies, HARLEY. Let me stay with you still on this. While talking, you highlighted the European Union, and even in our preamble, we saw that multilateral or international organizations were actually highlighted, and of course, today they're facing a lot of scrutiny pertaining their involvement in issues of global concern. Let's take for example, pertaining the war in Ukraine, which you just highlighted, HARLEY. You know, the Hungarian official, Viktor Orban, is actually facing, you know, some sort of, I can say he's at a crossroad at this particular moment because of, you know, an ideological stance pertaining the involvement or Hungary's involvement in Ukraine, the peace mission that he actually embarked on, especially visiting Russian President Vladimir Putin, and of course the peace message. But then when we look at the reaction from the European Union, we continue to ask to what extent, you know, these new the changes occurring is actually bringing, you know, a situation of deterioration in relations, especially in, you know, in Europe, pertaining the crisis in eastern Ukraine.
Well, if I may, I can talk about the big picture involving Viktor Orban. Are we still connected? I'm not hearing anything.
Hi,
okay.
HARLEY. Yeah, of course.
You can hear me now?
I can hear you.
Okay. So Viktor Orban launched a peace offensive. He met with Zelensky, who wasn't very cooperative. Then he met with Putin. Then he met with Xi Jinping. And then he came to the United States, to the NATO summit. He was not welcome there. But then he met with Donald Trump. And Trump told him that he would try to bring an end to the Ukraine war before he was inaugurated, if he wins the election in November.
And then Trump got shot.
And then Trump, exactly. Now, what's important about that is that what Orban did was break the deal that existed among the European countries. And the European Union is basically trying to remove him as the temporary head of the European Council. Hungary has a 6-month period for that. They may even try and kick Hungary out of the European Union. What the hell kind of democracy is the European Union? You have unelected bureaucrats who answer to bankers and corporate cartels, but not to the people of Europe. The political parties, the main parties, the Social Democrats in Germany had their worst election in June. Macron nearly got voted out of office. The Italian situation is chaotic. You had a turnover in the United Kingdom, which unfortunately, there's no difference between Labour and Tories when it comes to international policy. They all work for the City of London. Yeah. But this is, Europe bet on Biden and the Ukraine war, and they were wrong. They said Russia would lose, that Ukraine would win, and we just have to keep the money and the arms flowing. And now Europe is sitting there thinking, if Trump comes in, if Biden's gone, how can we afford to keep this war going? Sure. And so I think we're at a point where Europe is going to have to recognize that it's not 1800 or 1900. We're in a new era. And Europe has a lot to offer. But the arrogance, the Eurocentric arrogance, like the Western egocentrism of the United States, has to go. And you have to recognize that people have a right to develop. This is what human rights are really all about. Sure. Europeans will talk about human rights till they're blue in the face, and then they turn around and support the International Monetary Fund killing countries and sanctions. So this is a moment for tremendous change. I'm optimistic. And I think what Orban showed is that one person can make a big difference.
Absolutely. Indeed, one person can make a big difference, and of course, we can already be moving towards ending the flare that has divided the world. Achille, we want to look at the feasibility of all of these, pushing the maybe NATO member states and even the EU in changing stance or ideologies pertaining, the parameters being used in the crisis or the war in Ukraine. Here we are looking at how leadership or new leaderships can try to, change all of these narratives. The present situation in the United States of America, the outcome of the November 5th elections will determine the next line that the states would take, the United States would take as far as its foreign policy is concerned. So let's try to, relate it or correlate it with the aspect of creating new alliances or maybe solidifying already existing alliances with the hope of bringing resolve to the connected problems of the global world?
Right, that's an excellent question, Clarice. I mean, the next elections in the United States, the November elections, are causing a lot of concern from different parts of the world. Some people are looking forward to having Mr. Trump elected again. And if that happens, then as he already stated, the Ukraine war is going to be over, and all the new colony, all the neocon, and all the mondialists, people who want to rule the world, they're going to be upset, and thus the attempted coup that happened, on his life recently. And so it shows that, that there is people have very high concerns about Trump coming back to power. Now, there are internal reasons in the United States, within the United States, why some people, many people don't want Trump to be back, to power. There are so many reasons. People feel that Trump, he's a wild card. He's the one that only caters to his own interest, his personal interest. And, he's someone who is very uncontrollable by the deep state. I don't know what deep state means, but some people call it the deep state, and so it's so many different reasons why people don't want Trump to be back in power. He's going to jeopardize so many people's interest, so many organizations' interest, and especially the European nations who are very aligned with the U.S., to fight this war in Ukraine. They are going to be the one they're going to be very upset. One of the areas that we know Trump has been shaking European countries is on the NATO issue, right? So for Trump, everybody has to chime in. People have to put the money in. People have to pay up, for their security. They shouldn't, benefit from the U.S. security, infrastructure. Let's put it this way, without paying in. And Trump, has been very adamant about that, and that caused a lot of concern from the Europeans. So we know what's going on. But internally, within the United States, there's so many fear about Trump coming back and, doing the same thing he did, even worse than what he did last time. Yeah. We've seen what happened with the FBI. We've seen so many different agencies that were not, looking forward to working with him because he really dismissed them. He really never, heard, whatever they had to say about what's going on in the world, what's going on within the U.S. And so there's a variety of reasons, and then some other people outside of the U.S., like African, for example, if we look, I've been speaking to a lot of Africans who live in Africa and who are looking forward to Trump to coming back because he's going to end those wars, he's going to bring peace back to the world, and business is, business is going to be, back, especially some areas of the world where there's so much wars, who are those areas that are suffering from those eternal wars that never stop, and so they are just tired of that. So they want someone to bring peace, and Trump seems to be the person to do that for them. So either way, when it comes to Kamala Harris, that's another situation where people are fearing that there's going to be more wars. She's going to keep doing what Joe Biden has been doing, even worse. And so it's very unsettling, regardless of where you stand. People have a say on this. But what I would say is that we in Africa have to really focus on what is important to us. We have an opportunity with the new world that we're trying to build to work together. The unity of Africa is the most important thing to do today, regardless who is at the White House, regardless of who is in the White House, because we know whoever is at the White House is going to come to Africa to benefit, to bully us, to benefit from our resources. That's what they care about. They don't care about the people. So we have to stand firm, unified, and work with partners. The BRICS partners are a great place to start, but we still have to work within the African Union, just like you mentioned earlier, Caris, within our own African organizations to build strong partnerships to put together the basis for our own development, building roads, infrastructure, creating, infrastructure that's going to allow, agriculture, people who are, who are working in the agricultural industry, people who are doing all kind of activities to be able to sell their products around the world. We have to build those bridges. I mean, we have so much work we need to do internally to bring our country in a position to be very, very affirmative on the world stage. And unless we do that, we're still going to remain very weak. And that's my focus, and that's why I have this show that I do on TV regularly on your TV, for example. I talk a lot about what African can do to develop a country. We have different topics that we discuss every week, and that helps people understand what is needed, how to go about doing these things, because sometimes it's just information, just a little information will help somebody do so much. So that's what we all hands on deck to help Africa, and so many other people are doing it, and this is the way to go. We have to stop focusing, solely externally, because doing so keeps us, in a situation where we are today, and that's not what we want to be.
Indeed, given that a nation or continent cannot function in silence, it is imperative, like you've said, Achille, Ekeu, to actually understand the stakes, to be able to position yourself. Alexander, we cannot talk about shifting alliances or creating new alliances without looking at the aspect of sovereignty. Diversity is actually very imperative. If we actually leverage it positively, then the world can benefit more from it. Let's look at the position of non-aligned or balancing countries. How can these countries, or countries which are non-aligned or balancing countries, navigate the landscape to maintain sovereignty while also benefiting economically and politically from larger powers?
Well, I would unfortunately argue that in the system that exists nowadays, that is almost impossible, because like we mentioned before, the current system is inherently racist and views the rest of the world as just, these people, these places to be plundered. I went to college in DC, in Washington, DC. I worked in Congress for a year, and ever since the war on terror begun, right? Washington D.C. There's so many new villas built around it, so many new mansions, because there's so much money to be made on war. And I have friends back in the States, back in Washington, who still meet with these people, the policymakers, and these people, make all these great claims about human rights, about, democracy in Ukraine. Who the Ukrainian president is illegitimate because his term is over. But yeah, Ukraine is fighting for democracy against evil Russia. And then, when the TV cameras are off, there's opening expensive bottles of champagne with, lines of cocaine, celebrating that they sent another $10 billion of cash to Ukraine to kill people. The money that the United States alone has sent to Ukraine to kill people is enough to, solve world hunger for, I don't know, like 10, 20 years or something. Somebody calculated this. Just those tens of billions sent for people to kill each other and die would be enough to solve world hunger for decades. And again, build infrastructure in Africa, build things that are better. And I don't know about Harley's program, right, about the new monetary system. But speaking of, diplomatic solutions, I would argue that we need something like the Congress of Vienna, right, the Concert of Vienna back after the Napoleonic Wars, where there were several great powers. It was called the Concert of Vienna, right, because they balanced each other off. They recognized that they all have their own national interests,
Absolutely.
and they balanced each other off. And that would be in a modern world, where it's not bipolar or unipolar, but multipolar, right, where you have several actors that work, that realize that they, that respect each other,
Sure.
that realize that others have their own interests and respect those interests, and for the betterment of our human civilization, work together. If we were not, doing what we're doing now, we could be colonizing Mars right now with all that money that we're spending on killing each other, or on suppressing Africa, or on suppressing Asia, or on suppressing South America. And again, like I said before, we are pre-gaming World War III right now. Hopefully we can get away from that.
Sure.
Hopefully, smarter people will prevail. But again, I'm sure that there will be another Thomas Matthew Cook, Thomas Matthew, the guy who shot Trump, that they will not allow him to enter the White House again, because he's just way, way too uncontrollable by them. So again, here's hoping, but in order for smarter people to prevail, unfortunately, a lot of people will probably have to die first.
Indeed, it is. You want to comment to that, Harley?
Yes, I would.
Of course, go ahead. Go ahead.
I'm happy Alexander has a pretty good understanding of the United States.
Sure.
The military-industrial financial complex runs Washington, D.C. Biden is, the fact that the guy can hardly walk off the stage without falling, to trust him with a finger on the nuclear button is completely absurd. He's being given his orders from elsewhere. And if you look at the problem, you see, when you talk about smarter people, I look at Xi Jinping and look at Putin. As an American, I would say that we are so lucky that Putin is the president of Russia.
Absolutely.
Because of his patience. And I know in Russia, some people wish he were less patient in dealing with these Nazis in Ukraine.
I'm one of them.
Yeah, but the fact is that he has outflanked NATO. And all NATO can do is escalate the war. But the more that it's escalated, for example, Scholz, the German chancellor, was ordered by the Americans to take long-range missiles that are nuclear capable that can reach inside Russia. Now, in the 1980s, there was an anti-war movement in Germany that was huge. And who was leading it? The Greens. Now, who today is leading the war party in Germany? The Greens. And I can tell you that there are many, many Germans who are tired of having given away their sovereignty to the United States, but they're cowardly. They won't speak out. Now, that's why when I see someone like Condor, the former foreign minister of South Africa, I see a kind of leadership that we need in the world. When Blinken went to talk to her and told her, you need to deal with the lesbian issue, you need to have more democracy, she said, Mr. Blinken, you may not know this, but we're a sovereign nation, so don't come here trying to bully us. That kind of statement. Also, India. The United States is trying to get India to break with Russia, offering them weapons, offering them money, offering them to be part of the AUKUS agreement. And the Indians have a tradition. This is what I say about racism in America. We forget India is an ancient civilization. China is an ancient civilization. Russia has a long, beautiful culture. The United States is sort of an upstart. We have some good things in America, But the idea that we're the only power that can do these things is what's wrong. So these new alliances that are emerging, the BRICS, the SCO, the African Union, Mercosur in South America, these are the potential for the kinds of alliances which actually take care of the needs of people. Whereas in Europe and the United States, governments are putting money into weapons, into war, and they're neglecting the needs of the people. That's why I think when you look, and Alexandra, I know you were somewhat pessimistic in your comments recently,
Yeah.
but this is going to have to change because the American people will vote for Trump, but they're going to expect that Trump will actually do something more this time than he did last time.
Okay.
Can I chime in for a second? You're saying, Germans are afraid to speak up, but I had a YouTube channel for 9 years. I just came back from Donbass. I was in Mariupol. I try to explain, to Americans in English and the most basic terms, right, to soccer moms in the West, what is going on, why it's going on, right? Not the arrows on the map of where the troops are going, but actual reasons behind these things. The channel was kind of on ice for a couple of years, and then I restarted it back in May, and Google took it down in June. So it's not about people being afraid to speak up. It's about there not being platforms where you can speak up.
And there's censorship.
And thank God this channel exists, right? Thank God that we're talking right now. And hopefully Google will not take this conversation down. But overall, people in the States, people in Europe, most people realize that something is inherently wrong in the world. They want to change it, but as soon as they, speak up, it's like a whack-a-mole, right? And this is again why there will be another Thomas Matthew Cook, because people like Trump will not be allowed to re-enter the White House, and hopefully, again, I'm wrong, but just basically talking, saying the truth, saying these are facts, is something that in our crazy modern Orwellian 1984 world is no longer an option, unfortunately. And again, thank you for this channel and to everybody here for being those people who dare to talk and dare to say the facts.
If I could just say something here,
let me just.
would be important.
I will come back to you, Harley.
Yeah.
I will come back to you subsequently, just to say
Okay.
that for you, media, of course, has understood the stakes and, of course, is out there to bring more understanding to the happenings in the world. And that is why we have the platform Global inside this moment. Achille, Ekeu, of course, we are looking at some of these hindrances to the world understanding the real stakes and reacting accordingly. And of course, we have already mentioned the world's global powers, but then let's define the place of the global south in this new dispensation of changing or shifting alliances. How can the global south navigate this scope of new maybe changing dynamics?
I mean, I think the global south is in a good position right now. Everybody, when we look at the world today, we see that the Western nations are the ones that are isolated. This war in Ukraine really clarified everybody's position in the world today. And when you look at those different positions, the votes at the United Nations, the sanctions that were thrust on Russia, and how every country of the global south did not, apply those sanctions. They refused, regardless of the pressure that they got from the United States, from Europe. Harley was just mentioning about I think she's the foreign minister from South Africa, right? I know her. She's very very straight. She exactly said that to Blinken, right? So those are the kind of freedom that many countries in the South are enjoying now because they don't feel obliged to follow what the United States are telling them. And the same with different African countries nowadays. People have the freedom to choose. The choices are overwhelming today, and so they don't have to cater to what the Europeans want or what the United States want. No, you just have to get together and chart your own path. And this is why cooperating between a relationship between the global South has an impact. And the BRICS are really the place that you can measure that. The GDP of BRICS nowadays surpasses what of that of the G7 nowadays, and it's going to go growing. It's just going to grow from there. It's not going to dwindle. It's going to be growing from there as more countries join BRICS. Relationship between business between those different countries is being done with their own currencies. So people are talking about a BRIC currency that could come later, but they don't have to. But right now they're doing business with their local currencies nowadays, and so this is critical because so many countries were in a situation where they had to ask for authorization. They had to, especially African countries in the CFA franc zone, who depend on France. That CFA is a currency that's not used around the world. It's not known around the world. It's just known by the French. You can only do business with France, and doing business outside of France requires that France be involved in authorization in place. You have to drop 50% or whatever transaction you're doing to the French Treasury, all the kind of stuff. It's a disaster. So they are finding a way now to trade with different partners in the world without going through France. And so there's so many different changes that are happening, and that's why all these countries are up in arms. You see, France is lost, completely lost. They can't control anything. They don't know what to do. Russia is there supporting us when it comes to weapons, to our economics. China is there to help us, economics, infrastructure. Russia is there for military purpose, helping us get the weapons that we need to fight terrorism that was brought in Africa by the French and destabilizing Libya, killing Colonel Gaddafi, and what we find out from this war on terrorism, we find out that Mali discovered that France was financing those terrorists, was supporting those terrorists. That's why they sued France at the United Nations and want a special United Nations meeting to discuss that situation so they can show the proof, the real proof that they have of the support of France to terrorists. And so we figured that now terrorism is the weapon that the West is using to subjugate African countries, and then so that to destabilize those countries, so there's no way for us to develop. And that goes to the point that Mr. Schlanger was talking about. They don't want us to be developed. Once you get close to that, they want to destroy you. They want to, they don't want us to be there. But it's up to us to fight back and fight very strongly. And that's what I see in the Sahelan countries doing, and this is the way to go.
Absolutely, it's the way to go. Now, HARLEY SHLANGER, while talking earlier on, of course, we're trying to see how we can, the world, major stakeholders, can bring the West in general to the realization that this is a new era, and of course, the world is moving from the purse of Western hegemony. And how can they inculcate these transformations to make international cooperation more enjoyable, that will bring, of course, will help the countries to leverage the advantages of a more connected world in a multipolar world?
Well, I think what Achille was just talking about is important, this idea of trading in national currencies. Because when you have to go through the dollar system, that means the Western banks make money anytime you do a trade, anytime you do a settlement. And so some of the income that you're making ends up in the pockets of Western bankers. Now, there's an economist who's the chief economist of the Eurasian Economic Forum, named Sergei Glaziev, who worked for many years with LaRouche. And Glaziev has put forward this idea of using national currencies. For example, the Russian ruble and the Indian rupee, the yuan now, the Chinese currency, is used to pay for Saudi oil. This is a move toward a change outside of the dollar, de-dollarization. Now, Americans are terrified of this because they think this means the world's against them. No, the world's against the bankers who are oppressing the American people in the same way they're oppressing the people of the rest of the world. The United States hasn't recovered from the COVID period. The United States has inflation. Biden hasn't solved the problem. So the question is, will someone speak for American national interests, which are not the same as the interests of the international banking community? And that's the problem we have. We've lost this idea of a national mission that would be to develop our nation to work with other nations. That was Franklin Roosevelt's idea. That was what Kennedy wanted to do. That's why Kennedy opposed colonialism, and that's why he was killed. So we need to have a system where we protect our leaders who are willing to break with the control of these globalists, and at the same time understand that the development of a nation in Africa is not a threat to the United States.
Exactly.
There's nothing better for the American people than to see children in Nigeria and Algeria and Tanzania getting an education and getting an opportunity to make a good living and leave a better future for the country. That shouldn't threaten anybody in the world. And this is where I say that the racism is used in the United States to convince the population that you have to protect the dollar system. And the dollar system is gone. And the sooner we realize that, the better off we'll be. And then we can sit down with Putin and Xi Jinping and Modi and Lula and start working out agreements that are mutually beneficial.
Okay, and of course, when you talk about that, we look at, what agenda can the world adopt because the world is in an inflation point. Alexander, here we're looking at, these are already the realities happening. The major changes are unavoidable, but then it is imperative to define a clear agenda that can take the world through this transformative part, mitigating the negative consequences. Of course, the goal is to avoid a third world war. So, in your perspective, Alex, what is that defined and practical agenda that can, include all of humanity or even major countries that are involved in the decision making that will have effects on the global peace, global geopolitics, and of course, global stability?
Well, first of all, the political class has to change because the political class, like we all have been saying here, is not looking out for the interests of their own citizens. They're looking out for the interests of bankers, weapon producers, big tech, big pharma, big anything. They're not looking out for the small folk, and that's the point that, like I mentioned before, the great people of the United States, the great people of Europe, the great people of Africa, Russia, China, India, don't want these morons pushing us into billions of death that will come if they get their way. People across the world, again, I lived in the States, I lived in England, I lived in Europe. People across the world are mostly good, gentle, kind people who want to get along. And this political class that exists in the West right now is not representing their interests. And again, if in the States, at least you have people like J.D. Vance, right, who managed to come from humblest of the beginnings and get into Senate and now is on Trump's ticket. there's at least some form of democracy in the United States. There's absolutely zero democracy in Europe. None of the people making decisions in Europe to send European money, European weapons, and God forbid, European soldiers into war, none of these people are elected. So what has to happen in order for humankind to survive? The political class needs to change. Programs like yours have to exist. Hopefully, I will restart my channel about Ukraine somewhere on a different platform.
Yeah.
All the speakers here have to be heard more. We on the ground level, on the grassroots level, have to come together and realize that we're being run by people who don't give a about any of us.
Of course, HARLEY, with the censorship that is already very visible, patterning the treatment of information that will, of course, edify the population, and of course, this will maybe push them into having a positive, a positive reaction to some of the major or drastic decisions taken by leaders with the vision of, redefining a new world order. In your perspective, what do you think is that agenda that can even suit Western leaders to join the transformative journey into making the world a more better place for mankind?
Well, I want to say I certainly feel Alexander's pain about his YouTube
Absolutely,
channel.
yeah.
My Facebook site, I was getting 75,000 to 100,000 views for a while, and it got shadow banned and it went down to 1,200.
Well, mine was shadow banned for years, and then now that I restarted it, it was just totally banned for no reason. Like, you didn't follow the community rules. Which ones? We don't care to tell you.
Okay.
Because you just because we just don't like you. Again, I very well know the community rules on YouTube, and that's why I followed them always. And at some point, they just got tired of me, and they were like, no, shadow banning is not enough. We're just going to ban you completely.
Well, and there's definitely censorship, the so-called democracy in the West. Mm-hmm. They just shut down in Germany a website, Compact, I think is its name. It's a problematic site, but they shut it down. They just shut down a mosque in Hamburg because they said it was promoting radical Islam. We're seeing signs of, you have to call it what it is, it's fascism.
Yeah.
It's an attempt to suppress spread of ideas that go against the corporate cartels. And the original definition of fascism is when corporate cartels control governments. Mm-hmm. Now, I think that the point is, those of us who know this have to be as bold as possible, as clever as possible to get around the censorship, and to reach out to wherever you can find people. And what I'm finding, just in the last weeks, I've been invited on programs in Algeria, Iran. Clarice, again, was good enough to extend this opportunity to me. I was on in Buenos Aires. Mm-hmm. There are people around the world who want to hear people in the West who are not crazy, or to use Alex's term, morons.
Yeah.
They're happy to know there are some of us mm-hmm. that recognize this fight is going on. You can't stop the idea of freedom and sovereignty and development by shutting down a website.
Yeah.
You can slow it down, but I think we have to have the persistence and the willingness to wage a fight no matter what. And,
Amen.
And just find co-thinkers and conspire and work together. And Alexander, I'd like to interview you for my channel some point to get your voice out, because I think it's an important one for people to hear.
All right.
And Achille, same with you.
Okay, sure, of course.
Achille, in line with what we just underlined, you remember in the start of the program, we said the realignment of power not only creates a fertile ground for opportunities, but also introduces potential for conflict as countries navigate through the complexities of diplomacy, trade, and security in a multipolar world. So the question I want to, or I would appreciate if you elaborate on, Achille, is how can countries already conversant with the reaction from these stakeholders that wouldn't want to ensure that information is fine-tuned in order that will not meet their interest. How can they react to it to mitigate the adverse effects of such changes in alliances that we see in today's world, of course. That is the imperative nature of Global Insight and other, discursive programs to bring forth, constructive analysis that will not push the world into more chaos.
I think, just like we were just talking earlier, I think we need to really allow people to speak up, to speak their mind, and then if there's the people listening, if there is this democracy, that we talk about, everybody talk about democracy, but what we see today, no one is listening to what the people are saying. Only those leaders, they're just doing what they want. They don't care. And so, but we have people have to keep voicing our concerns, keep talking, and using all the means necessary. For example, this media platform, for example, is a fantastic opportunity to bring people from around different parts of the world to talk. And this is why I love this show, because I can meet people from different parts, from Russia, from Germany, from the United States, from Brazil, from all over the world, yeah. So we can have that conversation and then decide, where we want to take our world, how we want to, how this world should be run, and by doing that more and more and more, despite the different situations that we're facing, especially censorship and all kind of things that are happening. We still have to keep fighting, and that's the only course, the best course of action that we need to take. Now, when it comes to the place of to Africa, for example, and I'm focusing on Africa mostly because there is so much to do in our continent, and this is a place that every time someone's tried to do something, then there is a deluge of negativity, of pressure, on that continent, on those leaders who are trying to get things done. I'm thinking about the Sahelian state, for example. People are trying to, prevent them from uniting. The ECOWAS folks are still behind those 3 states to bring them back into ECOWAS under the leadership of France and the United States today. So they don't want to see people do their own thing, trying to create an environment that is conducive of growth, of development in Africa. They don't like that. It's a menace. But why is it a menace to them? If you are a rich person living in an area that is surrounded by very poor people, how happy can you be? You cannot be happy when you see every time you go to work, you see people, in front of your doors looking, begging you to give them, $1 or whatever, 50 cents. No, that's not a good environment. So you want to see other people be happy, so you also are happy, because there's no happiness in being rich and having everything, and everybody around you is broke. That's not good. So all these are things that Africans, when I look at them, the different states, the different leaders, we have to come together through different means. Whether it's the African Union, whether it's the different human rights organizations or regional organizations that we put together, we have to be able to define those organizations, to control them, find a way to control them, to set agendas, and then abide by those agendas and deliver for our people. I think this is going to happen. This is not today. With the youth that I see in Africa today, who are very hungry, who have so many skills, who are not doing anything, people are hungry to work for their own continent. They don't want to go across the Mediterranean and die all the time. That is enough. You know,
Okay.
people want to stay home and build their continents because they have everything that they need to build a continent. So that
Absolutely,
is the
yeah.
opportunity that the African people have, and they want to seize on that. Any leader that is not going to change, they're going to be toppled. That's what I see. That's what we see today. And that wave, you know, it could happen, you know, slowly and then go fast. You know, as we've seen in many parts of the world, it always starts slowly. When people feel, you know, that they can do things that they didn't believe they could do in the past. And like people in Africa today, they feel like they can talk to friends head to head. You know, they can, kick French army out of the country without anything happening, without having to go to war. You know, people are comfortable, you know, talking straight to those countries that are preventing them from, you know, doing what is needed for their people. So the more this happens, the more comfortable Africa is going to be, and I'm sure very soon things are going to accelerate to the pace where no one's going to be able to control this, and every leader who is in a country that doesn't cater, that doesn't work for his people, is going to be toppled, and you know, that's what's going to happen. So, but we are here to we're not advocating coup d'etat or anything, but we're just saying that leaders have to change, right?
Absolutely, yeah, working for the good of the people. We have just 5 more minutes to be together. I think we'll be coming for the concluding phase, starting off with you, Alexander. What is the take-home message, particularly as we continue to navigate the scope of these shifting alliances and, of course, creation of new partnerships in the interconnected world of today? 2 minutes, please.
Yeah, I would say that like we've been talking about this the whole program, we need to build horizontal alliances between people on the ground, between people in Africa, in Russia, in the United States, in Europe, in China, in Latin America. These horizontal, like thank God we have, you know, internet programs like this that allow us to do that allow us to find each other, that allow for people to build horizontal alliances that can then hopefully not let the world be destroyed. So geopolitical alliances are great, but alliances between people, there are more of us than there are of them. And if we build horizontal alliances, there's a chance we can save this beautiful planet.
Thank you so much, HARLEY SHLANGER. A take-home message, especially for the Western Bloc, as the perspectives are changing in you know, the political sphere and even the economic sphere.
Well, I'm happy to see Alexander finished with a smile on his face and happiness, because the key to the future is the concept of mutual benefit. And he mentioned the Congress of Vienna. Before that, there was something called the Peace of Westphalia, which ended the 30 Years' War, the religious warfare in Europe, when they finally decided, if we don't stop fighting, there won't be anyone left. Why not work for each other's benefit? And I think that's the motto we have to recognize that human beings are a unique creature. And either we're going to use our minds and our powers for the betterment of all human beings, or we're going to destroy the planet. And I'm very optimistic. I think this discussion has been very useful, very helpful for me to see so many people thinking in this way. And whether you like it or not, change is coming. So you better find out what the potential for that change is.
Indeed, a change is coming. The world is in that inflation point. It is necessary sometimes to take drastic decisions that will correct the mistakes of the past. Achille, of course, in line with what HARLEY SHLANGER just underlined, using our minds, not to become weapons, of course, but to think constructively towards, you know, realigning some of the ideologies that we have that can fix the world rather than destroy. So I will want you to wish that you conclude by elucidating more on how, with these new dispensations, alliances. We can use the human intellect to not as weapons, but of course as tools for better, ideologies that can redefine international cooperation and bring back globalization on track.
Right. I mean, I'm going to analyze this from the Pan-African standpoint here, and exactly what we spoke about during this conversation is the fact that Africa, it has to find its own way, and but there are so many influences that are preventing so many things from happening, and so by using the different means, for example, this channel, we can reach those leaders who are very, difficult to really do the work that is necessary for their people to thrive in the future. So we want to talk to them. We want to have the opportunity to share, that Africa is the paradise. It is a paradise on the planet right now. It's the paradise. It's the future. It's always been the case, for a while before the Europeans through Rome and all different countries around the world that came. They all came to Egypt. And Egypt is in Africa. Egypt was black. Everything that had been invented, for the past thousands of years has been done by black people. And then we migrated. These different colors that we have, the melanin that we have, different colors that we have, they all come from the same source, which is in Africa. So it's just normal that Africa rises again. And in order for us to do that, we have to come together. We're not saying we don't want anybody outside, but we're saying we have to more focus on what we can do internally in the continent. So because when Africa is good, the whole world is going to be better. Because all these other cultures around the world, they are coming from Africa. They are coming to Africa to get what is needed for their survival, their development, and the understanding of the world, of humanity. And so for a while,